Hello everyone, my name is Seth. You are watching Rayon Tech TV and I am back with the UI UX development series for Appian. This is part 21 where we will be discussing the KPI component that is recently introduced in Appian as a UI component. So let's focus on the documentation in order to understand the arguments that are required to populate this KPI field, and then we'll see the practical. So it says that a bank KPI field with respect to different arguments. Let's understand the meaning of KPI first. The KPI stands for key performance indicator. Key performance indicator can be an indicative metric of anything that is pertaining to your business. For example, for companies, KPI for employee relates to returning to office, performance in the project, any escalation that you have, or anything that you believe that is relating to an employee related stuff, how many number of leaves he has taken, which are unplanned. So anything that can be belonging to an employee can be a part of the HR portal for his KPI. And anything relating to a business when it comes to a revenue, like total revenue for this quarter, total sales for this quarter, total sales for this year, no, total profit of a total aggregated profit for 5 years. This can be a KPI, and KPI will help you to drive business decisions, or it helps you to understand the conclusive nature of the entity that you are pertaining to. So we struggle to populate different matrices by using rich text earlier than Appian recognized this issue, and we are here with KPI field, which helps us to produce KPIs as inclusive data, and it helps you to keep uniformity in your UI UX design, and the entire journey of the user to see the report, to see the screen, is far better than what we have previously. So let's focus on the arguments now. It's the function is quite simple. A bank KPI field data is any type. It can be a reference record type data using A bank record data. A bank record data is a different function. We'll be discussing that later in the practical. We are having primary measures and primary measure and primary text. Primary measure is not, it is just similar to what I have explained in the chart in the earlier videos. If you have not understood those ones, do have a look on the previous charting videos that I have explained in the series. You'll be able to find that in the playlist. Primary text, the main text to identify or describe the primary measure. So basically it is the text that you have to showcase on the KPI front. Icon, so if there is any kind of icon that you want to show with this field, then you can refer to it, and there is a documentation available for icons which you can have a look for that. Help tooltip, it is a standard argument. Align left right, sorry, my bad, align will be start center end. And accessibility text is for you use for screen readers. It does not produces any screen like visible change. It is just for using for screen readers. For the different OSs have, Microsoft has its own accessibility screen reader. Android and iOS, they have their own. So this is for that. So this component will have certain accessibility text which you are pertaining to, and then you can you know allow the screen reader to read it out as per the requirement. Tooltip, it is a standard argument which is available for every other function. Then we are having visibility. These things are quite basic and generic, which I have explained in the previous component, so I'll not waste too much time here and I'll focus on practical more. So visibility, do you have any kind of condition where you want to showcase this? So you can put a null check, or if you can put if user is a member of this group, then only he'll be able to see the KPI. Anything can be possible. Secondary measure, like for the KPI trend, again you can put up the secondary measure using a bank measure. For primary measure also we are having a bank measure, as well as for secondary measure also. Trend, so it defines the numerical calculations for trend in the KPI configured using the variable FV bank primary measure and FV bank secondary measure. If no secondary measure is provided, this parameter is ignored. So the valid values for the trend is auto by default, and difference, and percentage, and none. So whatever the measure you choose, based upon both the values, you can have difference as a trend, you can have a percentage as a trend, or you can have none. Trend format, it can be again, it is relating to trend. What we set up in trend, it can be a valid value as an integer, decimal, dollar, euro, pound, based upon what you want to showcase is what you can choose in the trend format. Again, we can put up the icon for the list of available icons for trend icon. You can set up trend color. which are standard colors for Appian, and you can put any valid hexagonal code here. Secondary text, and then icon. Secondary text is just you know uh, the trend plays next to the trend to identify basically about the data. So it is more about the primary and secondary text. So primary text is the main text, whereas the secondary text is the subordinate text with the KPI. Icon color, you can put a standard color property, or you can put any valid hexagonal code. Again, primary text color. Similarly, primary measure color, whatever the measure you would choose, you can have a color. Secondary text color, you can choose the colors. Icon style, is it a stamp or is it icon by default? Template, so defines the template to be used by the KPI elements. So valid values are compact, adjacent, and stacked. So we you can refer to the design according to your own implementations, like how you are designing the screen, and based upon the best practices you can follow it up. So if you are designing the compact, we'll see up in the practical how it goes. Refresh always, so does this KPI refreshes on a particular local variable which is bringing the data from the API? Does this does this refreshes on a particular variable change? Does this refreshes always? Does this KPI field refreshes after a reference variable change? So these are the property, like refresh always, refresh after an interval of time, refresh on reference variable change, or reference on variable change. So you can put up some understanding on these kind of properties, and you can align the expected types with them. If there is any dependent variable, if you put refresh always true, so it will always refresh with each user interaction. If there's any kind of specific time interval where you want the KPI field to be refreshing, then you can set it up. Refresh after, so if there's any kind of record action, then you can set up. If there is any kind of record action pertaining to the screen, and you are having a KPI field on the top of that, then after record action it can refresh, and then it is a visual thing that is size like small, standard, or large. Standard is the default one. So let's see what is all about the KPI. So here in the example, it is quite visible for us to see that this is nothing but trend icon. Is it increasing, or is it decreasing? This is the actually trend format, that is decimal. This is the trend value, that is in percentage, and there is a secondary text, and I believe this is the primary text, and this is the KPI value. So there are different ways where you can implement the KPI with respect to your project implementation with your own use case. But how does measure works, how does KPI works, we can grab a recipe and we can see how it works. So for example, let's take about this one. Here we are talking about order. So let me take VOF customers as a reference for this KPI field. Where is KPI field? Here it is. So now you are having the KPI field on the screen. You have to first search the record types, which record type you are pertaining to. So I will have VOF. I don't think customer will satisfy the need for KPI, but let's see. So this KPI can be anything that you want, right? So it can be count of, it can be sum of, average of, distinct count of. Now why it is populating and how it is coming up, I just gave up my like basic record type, and if you see the code, it is quite simple. It is primary measure, and inside that we have used ABAC measure that I have discussed in the documentation, and inside that we are having different kind of functions. If you see the ABAC measure function, we are having function min, max, count or distinct count, sum, average, right? Alias, label, and filters. So right now I'm not filtering anything. I'm just here, the count is of ID. So how many records are there with respect to unique ID of customer is being counted in this KPI. So similarly, we can have a secondary measure as well as for, let's focus on the record type details first, then we will be able to see if we can populate the secondary measure or not. So we are having count of uh, IDs of customers, and addresses. Okay, let me think of something more. Tier, we can, we the logic to tier is either we can group by our stuff. But let's see. Let's go to design mode and see what else we can do. So here it is like the primary measure is count of ID, and another is max of ID, min of ID, sum of ID. So what we can do is let's keep it as of ID right now, and let's see. Do we have secondary measure? Yes. Can we keep a secondary measure? And let's see how it works. So it will be count of something. So I am not making it meaningful, but just to showcase how it works, I am just putting count of tier. It is a secondary measure now. Now, the primary measure and secondary measure has to be relative in terms of how it is growing or decreasing or increasing. This record type does not make much sense out of it, but the primary measure and secondary measure works in relation to each other. That's how the trend will come up in increasing or decreasing. The documentation that we have discussed is pertaining to that only. So if you see here this one. So here it says that record type, there is a particular order, and in the primary measure we are having average of the total cost with a date between this time and this time. So for example, month end or month beginning, let's assume this month end, month beginning, between this, what is the total average cost is my primary measure, and the format value is dollar. Here you can see. Now the secondary measure is this, which shows average total cost between another date. So from here you can see that in the previous quarter and the current quarter, what is the difference with the trend. Now if you see trend, trend icon, now there is a like additional condition here, that if my measure is if my measure value is greater than secondary measure, then thumbs up, and if my current value is less than secondary measure, then thumbs down. So here we are having thumbs down because it is less. Then by default it is smile, so it is less as of now, that's why you are seeing the less icon. Similarly, we are having trend color. Again, the same condition, if it is greater then it is accent, else it is secondary. By default it is auto. So if we ignore the trend icon and trend color, we can understand the primary measure and secondary measure works in relation to each other. So the primary measure is of the same record type, as well as the secondary measure is also the same record type, and there is a comparison between the total cost of orders from one quarter to another quarter. So here you can see that this is your primary measure, and this is your secondary measure, and the trend is being established. That's how the KPI field can be useful for you to populate the KPI values without putting complex logic on your own, through simple record type implementations. I have utilized a very basic like record type, that is view of customer, that is not having any other thing to compare with respect to date fields or with respect to anything. But yeah, this is how it works in terms of populating the value. So if I make it a simple KPI as of now, so I can ignore the secondary measure and just populate a current value for the KPI. So here you can see count of ID, so total customers, and you can put the filters like what kind of filter you want to put. So customers whose tier is XYZ. So if I want to grab the KPI for tier 3 customers, so I can put the field called tier is equals to 3. Okay. Now I'm getting the count of those customers whose tier is 3. Format value, uh, it is just a count. It's not any kind of currency where we have to populate any kind of currency. So in our example, it is just a count. And primary measure color. So you can put a custom color by using hexagonal codes, or you can choose a predefined color. So I can choose anything that I want. Secondary measure that makes more logical. Secondary measure will be more logical if we are having a valid record type to make it a secondary measure. But in our example, we are having a basic record type example. And for a recipe which you want to refer to primary as well as secondary, just like this one, so you can have a look at this one. This is a quite simple example, but it is 100% understandable to anybody who wants to compare primary as well as secondary measures. Primary text. So we can choose anything. Tier 3 customers, icon, you can choose anything that you want. It has to be a valid icon. You can refer to the documentation. Icon color, again, predefined or custom color. So if you want custom color, so you can choose any hexagonal code. Just put this hexagonal code here. This is how the color will be updated. I hope you can see the screen. It's now the yellow. Icon style, is it stamp or is it icon? So if it is stamp, it will be a circular, background behind the icon. Rest help tooltip, subscribe. Yes, I know you will subscribe. Trend. So is it a predefined trend like auto difference percentage? So if you see here, when it is not defined, here you can see on the top trend. Valid values are auto by default. So whatever you will put in primary and secondary measure, if it is not provided, then it is auto by default. Else you can put difference percentage or none. So right now my secondary measure is not there. So there is no meaning of trend to put here. Rest you can put trend icon or any kind of conditional trend icon in the design mode, uh, just like this one, conditional trend icon. So if this happens, then do this, else do this. So we are using a bang match function for this. Other than that, trend format, these things are common properties. And yeah, compact. So do you want your KPI to be compact? Is it like you want the adjacent thing to be done, like the icon as well as the value, or you want stacked, like the icon on the top and the value at the bottom? So this one I think is best for mobiles, which you can have a look at the best practices. What I believe is this KPI will not be in a standalone field. It will be a part of a layout on the parent side. So obviously it will be utilizing the parent layout, not the whole screen as a viewport. Alignment, start, center, end, size, small, standard, large. If I make it large, size will be bigger. Next, accessibility text, I already explained you, visibility, and yeah, the refresh variables. So as a beginner, it is easy for you to configure the KPI using the design mode. If we start looking at the code, you can see that this code can be complex to understand and complex to implement if you are a beginner. So my objective is to make you understand things as a beginner and make you realize that it is easy to configure things in low code platforms like Appian. So this is how the KPI field will look like. If you are able to understand the design mode, try to focus on the documentation part and understand how the values are working around with this one in terms of our own record type. So as you can see, we are having the data part, and then we have set up the primary measure, and then we have set up the color for it. Instead of this color, we can put up any hexagonal code, and then we are having primary text which is visible on the top, and then we are having icon which we have configured here, then icon style, that means sorry, icon style is below, icon color, that is yellow, icon style is stamp, that we have put it here, help tooltip, that means this one, and the template is compact, size is large, that is visible here, refresh after record action, which was configured there in the design mode. Now here you can see that this is easy to understand if you know which property requires what kind of functions against it. So we are having a bank measure. Now a bank measure is a separate function which you need to refer to the documentation in order to make it work. So primary measure property requires a bank measure function, which you need to know how to configure it. So if you ignore the filter part, it is quite simple to understand that you have to apply the function count on the field record type dot field dot the ID, record type dot field dot ID. And then you have to apply the filters. Here it is query logical expression is it is again another function which is setting up the operator, that is and the filter is, it can be right now it is a single filter, that is why we can ignore the curly brace also, but else it is fine. We are having record type dot fields, record type name dot fields dot field name, that is tier, is equals to 3. So if my tier is equals to 3, then fetch all the record type, fetch all the records and count the ID on the top of that. So this primary measure is the count of the IDs of all the customers where tier is equal to 3. This is how the KPI field is being populated, and this is how you can work on your own implementations for KPI. You can do a little bit more complex data. You can choose a complex record type where you are having similar two columns, or you are differentiating on the basis of date, just like we are having here. So if I copy this, I know the record type won't work here because this record type does not exist. So here it is a challenge for beginner developers to understand how things are working. But yeah, an intermediate or like senior dev will able to understand that how things are working in terms of properties and the functions that they are expecting. So that's my objective, to help you understand things on a very basic level, on a ground level, so that you can design your own implementations and make things work. So I will see you in the next lecture. If you really like my video, don't forget to like and drop a comment. This is a fuel of my motivation. Don't forget to subscribe, and till then, happy learning.